Welcome back to the Boundary Corner podcast. My name is Curtis Wilson.
I'm Brian Siegler, buddy. We're back on a Tuesday. It's West Virginia Hate Week.
Hate,
Let's get
hate,
going, man.
hate. Hate week, part one of the season, West Virginia week, man. And man, we got a lot to uncover tonight, but God, in 2 nights. It's Thursday night in Lane Stadium. Thursday night. The
Thursday night.
the place where Thursday night football originated and people knew it could be something big. And I think it's the 26th anniversary, something like that this year, of actually playing West Virginia on the Thursday night. I know we're at year 22 from one of the nastiest games ever in the series when Andre Davis went the fuck off for 3 touchdowns and Way Ward killed a kid on that punt return. It's still, and probably every single person watching tonight or listening has seen that play. But if you're a new Hokie fan or a young Hokie fan, press pause, or step away from the live stream. Go to YouTube, type in Wayne Ward, Virginia Tech, and let it do the search.
Nothing but fire.
Buddy, you doing good tonight?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. It's been a good week so far. Got some work done today. Got to do a little segment on AWOD Radio today with Adam Epstein.
Radio 910 here in the RVA, the best sports programming in the RVA. If you didn't catch my man Siegler out here at 2 p.m., can check him for a quick hit there. It was awesome. Second hit there, right?
I went third.
Third.
I was cleaning everything up there. We had I think the JMU beat writer was on there first, and then we had the 247 writer for UVA was in the middle slot there. So yeah, I kind of finished things off there for that segment.
Very nice, very nice. Well, y'all, like we've said at the beginning, this is West Virginia. It is Hate Week. But before we get into Know the Enemy of West Virginia, we've got to recap what happened last weekend. A lot of things went on before and during that game. The Hokies take a win over Wofford 27-7. Hokies go to 2-1. Slightly off our prediction, slightly off. We're about 20 points short on each side. But nonetheless, a win is a win in this situation. And before we get into the actual game itself, let's talk about the injuries in game and before the game. You had 3 key starters not even playing, and Keyshawn King, Tylen Garbett, and Josh Fuga. And Brian, when you saw and didn't see, or when you saw that those guys weren't playing, did it hurt your gut, or was it more of a we can win without them today?
Yeah, and I know we had alluded to it a little bit last week when we were doing the preview episode. I was going to be fine if King and Caleb Smith both sat this one out. We need them more this week than we needed them against Wofford. Obviously, Caleb Smith played, got a little banged up on a deep ball, kind of late in that second quarter. But we had Keyshawn King out. We had Tylen Garbett out. Josh Fuga sat. I'm okay with that. Like I said, that's a setup where you're going to need those guys for this stretch we've got coming up. So not just West Virginia, but the entire October stretch, which is probably the most difficult section of this schedule this year. Having those guys as fresh as we can have them for that push, I think is going to be more important than whatever they could have given us against Wofford. So,
Absolutely.
Good move by the coaching staff, and unfortunately, as I said, Smith got banged up mid game. Seems to be all right. Has been practicing so far this week. Same story with Silas Zancy, went down, but apparently could have went back in, but precautionary just kept him out. Again, it was Wofford. Game was in hand. No need to push it.
Anyone that got nicked mid-game with where that score was, when it was basically they weren't able to do anything offensively other than get a little first down and then essentially either get a sack or tackle for loss, nobody was going back in the game. as far as King, Garbett, and Fuga go, you already hit the nail on the head. You don't play them this game. Now, could that score have been potentially uglier with King in the game? Yeah. And does the offense maybe need confidence? Maybe, yeah. But on the other hand, Keyshawn King is the game breaker on that offense so far. He and Caleb Smith, and like you said, even without, you would have been fine with Caleb not playing, which I think would have still resulted in a Hokies win. Caleb gets slightly nicked and they immediately pull him. Is it one of those he could have went back in? Probably. But it's one of those weeks too where if you're hearing about these guys' injuries, and if West Virginia was last Saturday, I think every single one of them would have been on the field. I think Caleb would have came back. I think Silas would have came back. I think it's showing roster management that sometimes a little nick, you don't need a guy to go back in. Game's in hand. Let's move on.
Yeah, with Caleb, it seems like it's like a rib issue, which those things can linger. We know that.
That's pain tolerance, though, right?
Laying out for that deep ball, I think, is what kind of probably triggered that for him. And it's pain tolerance, but at the same time, if it's one of those lingering things and you feel like you can take care of things without him, sit him down. He came out, he went back. And when he came out in the second half, he wasn't wearing any pads. He was just in the jersey. So he knew his day was over. We at that point we were handling them. It very much seemed like unless something drastically changed in the trajectory of the game, that was going to be in hand at halftime. We came out, didn't play as well in the second half as I was hoping, but again, as you said, a win is a win.
Exactly. All right, let's kind of take a quick high-level overview of some things you wanted to see last week, Brian. I think we did see a few of these things. The first is you said you wanted to get away from the predictable play calls, the predictable run play calls early in drives. And I think from what I saw watching the game again and in, we saw a lot more passes, a lot more quick plays on first down and the ball in the air versus running the ball.
Yeah, they definitely were hitting more of those passes in early downs. That I think that helped get the offense in a little bit more rhythm. We still didn't finish as many drives as I would have wanted to against that defense, and I think that's still that's where we're still a work in progress with finishing drives and closing out drives. We had the missed block on the 4th and 1 on the first drive after you had some productive plays before that got us in a pretty good position there to get some points. Then you had a couple others where, one thing here, one thing there killed a drive when you crossed the 50. So, there were still some points left on the field there that I feel like if we can clean some things up, that's going to be a little bit better looking number than I think we ended up with on Saturday.
Yeah, probably somewhere between 7 and 10 more points, probably somewhere closer to 40 like we thought it'd be. But that 4th and short play early, it's off and off tackle play. And I told you, if you're going to put Jalen Holston in there, I absolutely hate that play call for him. He does not have that sort of quick kick to get there if the play isn't blocked perfectly. And like you have been telling me so many times, if certain plays aren't blocked perfectly, you will lose. In that case, it wasn't. In that case, we lost. And, Brent Pry, who right there seemed very aggressive, similar to the BC game, it did not pay off. Now, comes back later, we have a 4th and short. He tends to go a little more passive. And I think something me and you've talked about a couple times, not only on here, but just in passing conversation, it seems like Brent Ply he looks at the data and the statistical points of what you should and shouldn't do, but then he essentially plays it by gut. Because there are times where you're like, oh, he's going to go for it here. He kicks the field goal. There are times like, take the points. He goes for it. So it's like, to me, he's kind of finding his rhythm as a head coach of when to go, when to push and when not to push. And right now it's kind of been a healthy balance thus far in the season.
Yeah, you wouldn't call him aggressive. You wouldn't call him passive. It's definitely situational, and I think it's relative to game flow. I think it's relative to where we are on the scoreboard. I think that's the big thing that we're looking at this point is that he is aggressive, I feel like, when he needs to be or when he feels like it's to his advantage, and then plays it more statistical when it's something that could be advantageous to punt, keep the field position. When the game's a little tighter, when things are a little still in the balance. So I like the mix there. So far, most of the times that he's rolled the dice, I would have rolled the dice, and most of the times when he's punted, I would have punted. So I don't have any big problems with what I've seen on that front. I probably would have went. I probably would have been a little more aggressive. Not necessarily this Saturday, but overall than he's been so far. But again, that's why he's got the money and I don't. Our armchair, I can be a lot more aggressive than he can, so because he's the one that's got to go to the podium and answer for it.
Absolutely. Now, the other thing I want to get your take on this from playing at a collegiate level. Do you feel like that we played down Saturday, or did it feel more like a controlled? We're going to win this game. There's no need to press. There's no need to go outrageous. They aren't as good as us. Because I want to get your take on that.
Yeah, I think the big thing for that is that I wouldn't say we played down to the competition. I think that there were times where we were not as effective as we want to be. Some execution wasn't there, and that took points off the board. I mean, when you say play down, I don't think there was one of those things where we got pushed around, where we looked like it wasn't a Richmond game, if we want to put it that way, from a couple years back. We didn't feel like we were almost outmatched or evenly matched in that game. We definitely could do the things that we wanted to do. We just didn't always execute as crisply as we could or should have against the level of opponents.
Absolutely. Well, that's kind of what I wanted to hear. That's kind of was my thought. It never felt like down. It never felt like the last couple years where there were teams you fairly felt better than, and you felt nervous getting into the quarter. You felt like from Jump Street, we moved the ball, we got aggressive, we didn't take the points. The next time we took the points, the defense had everything under control. So, yeah. All right, let's take a look at the offense, just kind of chit-chat about a few things here and there, and then we'll look at defense.
Yeah. Hey, before we jump in there, we got a little question here from Clark.
All right, what's your favorite piece of memorabilia in your caves behind y'all? All right, so mine is not even hung up at the moment. I have – oh, shoot. I rearranged the room last week, Clark. I have a lithographed, hand-drawn copy of Lane Stadium in the snow. Clark hit me up on Twitter. I can tell you exactly who did it. It was someone that lives down in the Southwest Virginia area. Gave it to a friend of mine, and that friend gave it to me at my birthday present this year. So soon, I'm hoping right about there where you see the golf club and the guitar, right above the VT blankie. That's where I'm going to try to get it. I've got to find the frame because it's an awkward frame. What about you, C?
Probably my favorite is going to be the pennant, the shield right behind me here in the corner. It's a little dark. You can't see it, but it's just over here, right here.
Yes.
It's that there is signed by Daryl Tapp himself. So that's probably the one that I covet the most. Daryl Tapp, one of my favorite all-time Hokies, probably easily in the top 3 for me. And got that. I'm trying to remember when it was. I'm trying to remember what game it was. It was spring game, I want to say 2004.
Okay. So while we were young kids, while we were kids.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That one goes way back.
Way back. Absolutely. I hope to have this hung up soon. I've also got here on my left, I've had a couple times you see it. I've got the map of Virginia in a wood cast with all the counties outlined and the VT right in the middle of it. That's probably number 2 favorite, as well as my plethora of Hokie game cups. So yeah, we've got quite a few things. And actually, I'm looking over here. I've got both of the beer mugs out from Hardywood sitting out now. So it's pretty sweet. All righty. All right, so let's now flip it. Awesome question, Clark. We appreciate that. We appreciate all you guys out there in the chat. We see you tonight. Low Country, Brian Cox, Clark, Robbie, Matt, appreciate you guys listening and watching tonight. But let's talk about the offense, Brian. Something you said last week we needed to happen is we needed to see something go on with the wide receiver room. And man, did we see it from two guys this week.
Yeah, Jaden Blue and Christian Moss, big days for the Hokies. Blue getting in the end zone, making a couple NFL caliber catches, especially that one kind of down the seam between two defenders.
Absolutely.
Elevating, making the catch, bringing it down, moving the chains there. And Moss, a lot of stick moving routes, a lot of possession type things early on in the game to get him going. He was really probably the standout player in the first quarter when we were kind of a little unsteady as we kind of got our footing heading into the second quarter there.
Absolutely. And for Blue, it couldn't happen to a better individual of everything he's went through to not only have a good game, but to catch a touchdown pass and to just feel like kind of the weight, because we've been hearing he's been nicked and that he's been trying to come. We've seen him play, but we haven't seen it develop on the field, clearly developing on the field last Saturday. And then Christian Moss, we'd heard his name several times in the fall camp. And was it one of those, was it just noise that coaches are trying to talk somebody up and get somebody moving? In this game, we saw it. And he had the one miss, though, the one miss on the comeback, which was if he catches the ball, the guy fell down behind him. He's probably dead to rights in the end zone. So I'm sure they're probably going to be working on some comeback drills this week, like secure the ball first. Secure the ball first. Somebody else, what about Gallo getting back to game one type production? I mean, he did very little against BC. And, I mean, to say we win that game with him doing little production is kind of unbelievable. And now getting him back in, it's pretty awesome.
And, yeah, we kind of talked about it last week where it seemed like BC was big-time keying on those short, flat routes to the tight ends. We had it heavy in the rotation against ODU. They were jumping them pretty quick. I think just with some of the different personnel, we had some different play calls this week that got a little bit more spacing in that kind of second level of the defense. I think that helped Gallo get open on a more regular basis, and I think that'll bode well. We'll see if we can keep that up against West Virginia this week.
And then the return of Jalen Jones, man. I mean, only one catch, but that was a pretty sweet catch he made. And looks like he's starting to get his groove. I know it was later in the game, but again, just getting him on the field, getting those reps, obviously ran more than just the one route he caught. But the wide receiver room with, Caleb, with Gosnell, with Lofton, and now with Blue and Moss sort of making an impact, the depth is slowly building. It's taken 3 games to get more than 3 deep, and I'm missing somebody there. Because Brian had the that was the 6 we talked about, right? We talked about that was the 6 we talked about earlier in the season. So getting that there is really good. And I know Gosnell's becoming a steady Eddie. Gosnell's catching like 3 or 4 passes a game. I think he's went 1, 2, 3. But every time it's like a big first down catch. And it's moving the ball down the field, which is really key.
Yeah, and when we got the depth chart this week for the West Virginia game, we were looking at it and we were like, okay, well, this depth chart for the wide receivers finally looks like what we thought it was going to look like in fall camp, right? We got you got Blue and Smith on the outside, you got Lofton in the slot, and then backing them up, you've got now Moss and Jones outside with Gosnell in the slot. It's kind of what we thought this was going to look like from Jump Street, and heading into a big game like West Virginia, that's kind of a good comfort note to kind of feel like the wide receiver room is finally starting to take some shape here. And talk about Jalen Jones. Yeah, he got the catch. What impressed me was that yak, that the yards after the catch, and how he runs with the ball in his hand. He kind of runs with purpose. It reminds me a lot of, and this is not a comparison in terms of ability, but this is a comparison in terms of what it reminded me of just seeing him on the field. Anquan Bolden run after catch.
Okay.
He like angry running
Possessed.
from a wide receiver. Yeah.
Possessed. Like, don't get in the man's way. You are going to feel it. So, yeah, again, that room is slowly developing, and you wish it was quicker, but you know, hopefully better now than never. And now, talking about never, let's talk about the OL because we still saw some struggles there. First question I want to ask before we get into your grades and doghouse and a couple other things. When you saw when Moore went down early and you saw Schick come in, did that shock you? And then when Silas went down and he came back out, give me some stuff on Bob Schick because I think there, me and you are expecting. Okay, here's your chance to put the other Moore brother in or potentially Chaplin.
Yeah, it was interesting seeing Bob Schick out there, but I think we're probably at a point where when we look at the other players that could go in, I wonder if Moore and Chaplin are deep enough in the playbook or comfortable enough with the playbook where Rudolph feels like he can lean on them in extended periods.
Okay.
Or periods where we're not, game isn't fully in hand. That's my thought at this point as far as why they didn't get in. But he talked about it a little bit too. Is that unit's still trying to gel. When you're trying to gel, you probably lean on the guy that's had the more work, the more experience. Schick got in there, held up pretty good. I've got no real major notes on how he did there. I think it was a solid outing for him. Nothing super impressive, but sometimes all an offensive lineman has to do is be anonymous, and that's a good thing.
If you don't know,
and Schick, unless you were looking for him, Schick was mostly anonymous, so that's about as good as he could do, I think, in that type of sub-in role for his first big game.
That might be the best. That's the quote of the day right there. If you're an offensive lineman, remain anonymous. And it's 1,000% correct. Because if you don't know the name, essentially nobody's getting hit and nothing's getting blown up. And sometimes that's all you need to win football games, right? And you kind of mentioned it, and what Brian was alluding to was Coach Price's comment after the game of somebody asked him, it might have been Andy Bitter, like, why didn't the younger guys play? And he's like, Joe Rudolph's big thing is getting this first unit to gel together, and it's not happened yet. And the question is, let me ask you this: does it come a point in time where if they aren't gelling, Rudolph makes a move where it's like, okay, I've got to figure out why we're not gelling, and I've got to move someone out?
Yeah, I think he's going to get to that point. I don't think he wants to. I think he knows that in terms of ability, these are his best five at the positions that they're playing. But at some point, if it's not working, you gotta do some mix and match. And I don't think we're at that point yet. But
okay,
I think we're getting to a point where if we don't see some progress the next couple weeks, then that's going to be probably where he starts making some moves. But the grade for this week is honestly a D. Communication is still a big problem for this unit. I don't think they necessarily impose their will against a team that has subpar talent. And some of that was because of missed assignments, miscommunication with assignments, miscommunication with blitz pickups. On that fourth down, I don't know whose responsibility it was because I don't have the play call, but it looked to me like Silas and Jesse blocked the same defender. And there wasn't that's not a situation where they're working to the next level. Those are going to be cutoff blocks. It's a backside play. There's not going to be anything too intricate there. They shouldn't be blocking the same down lineman and letting one go completely free into the backfield. The only other option there is maybe that was Drake's guy, but Drake had a cutoff on a guy that was the outside linebacker. So it looked like that was probably some sort of miscommunication on the offensive line part there. And we saw that a lot throughout the game. There was sometimes stuff on the inside where a guy should have been working to the next level and kind of just hung around on a combo block. These are things that take plays that could be 5 to 6 yard gainers, 8 yard gainers, and turn them into 1 or 2. And that's the big problem we've had is that still on those early downs we're not productive enough where we're giving the offense a chance to be in those second and manageable and third and short situations consistently enough, even against a subpar opponent like Wofford.
All right. And Brian, I think we probably can all guess who's in the doghouse this week, but go ahead. Tell us who's in the doghouse this week.
We're putting Parker Clements in the doghouse this week. Not a good day overall, run blocking and pass blocking. Um, I was looking at PFF grades. Somehow Grant Wells has a higher PFF grade in pass pro than Parker Clements.
Uh, uh, oh man,
Not good.
not great, Bob. Not great at all. All right. Well, let's move off the offensive line, and hopefully that is improved this week because I think it has to be. And let's talk about quarterback play in general, and let's talk about Grant Wells. Obviously, definitely his best game as a Hokie, maybe one of his better games as a college quarterback. Over 300, 314 in the air, 74% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, no picks, and kind of looking. What did you text me about what you saw him doing? Shit.
He was going through his progressions a lot better.
That's it. Sorry.
Brain fart. You're good. Yeah. He was going through progressions a lot better this week. And again, some of that can be chalked up to a step down in competition level, but it still was his most consistent day by far. I'll take 74% completion all day,
every day,
especially since there's only a couple out there that were truly badly thrown balls by him.
Yeah.
And only one really ball that was kind of put in harm's way the whole day. So,
and that was early with that cover 2 ball. He kind of tried to fit, and I don't think it was caught, but it was one of those you go, oh no, okay.
Yep. He left it a little bit lower than you wanted to. A little bit lower, maybe put a little bit more air on it. Get a little bit closer to the sideline, a little bit deeper. Yep. So it was close, but that was the really only close call all day, and I think he took care of the football well, and he saw the field a little bit better. He still occasionally will stare down his primary route, kind of out the gate of the snap, and that's something that I think he needs to work on. But I give him a solid B+ on the day. Not a whole lot of big critiques for him. I know a couple folks were killing him on the timeline, but I mean, these are things that we're going to have to kind of massage as we go throughout the year.
You have to live with it. It's what it is. You have to live with what he is. And I mean, I know Jason Brown did get some run near the end of the game, which to me is good. Getting the backup quarterback involved just in live game action where he has reps. He made a few throws. It's good to have on tape. It's good to talk to. So I was very glad to see that. Now, one room that, I don't know if you put this on the offensive line, but the running back room did not have a good day. 3.3 yards a carry. We didn't have King, which me and you've already alluded to. That's fine. Jalen Holston had an okay day. Chance Black probably maybe the worst he's looked this year. Maybe he was one of the guys that was trying to press to impress the coaching staff, and but lo and behold, we think it's this is what our running back room is. Bryce Duke comes out in the second half, and I know by that time game was in hand. We had worn them down a little bit, but what was your take on Bryce Duke's day, Brian?
I mean, I think he had a good day. We showed some solid vision, good burst in the hole. My thing was that he ran through contact to finish the run. That's a big thing for me. So he showed that, and then obviously he showed his ability in the passing game with that wheel route that he took for a touchdown. Wells put it right in the basket there, and made a big catch. Not quite full extension, but had his arms out, cradled it in there, took it to the house. I like that. When we look at King being out, we knew that there was going to probably be some sort of step back in terms of production level from this room on the day. And we got that. And I think, Holston at this point, I mean, I know he's been banged up, but more or less he is what he is. And he's a guy that's going to be able to get you some hard running yards. but he's not going to break a bunch of big plays. He's just not that type of back. And I think you were right when you talked about Chance Black pressing a little bit. I think there were times where a little bit more patience maybe would have paid off for him. Um, but I think he was trying to one of those or hit the home run too early in the snap, and you ended up blocks didn't develop, things weren't there, and now you're getting a 1 or 2 yard gain instead of what could potentially been a modest but solid gain when you're trying to hit the hole hard and break to the second level too quick.
Absolutely. The one thing about Duke too, I know you talked about running through contact, obviously showing his hands, is when he saw it, he went. When he saw the lane, he went. There was, and that I know you talk about the vision. You've got to have good vision, but even there are some guys that have really good vision that essentially tend to wait, and they're trying to make the perfect hole happen. In his case, I know one was like a 5 yard run, and it was like going to the left side of the line, and he saw it and just cut it in and got 4. And like you said, he ran through the contact. To me, that decision making, like to me as a running back, having the great vision, but guys who decide to say, I'm cutting it right here, I'm going to hit the hole. And I go back and I think with the Jalen Holston run we pointed out at BC, where that left side of the line had it sealed and he was kind of waiting there. The linebacker's coming in the hole, meet him. Because if he doesn't tackle you and you get through him, there's a lot of green air in front of you, and it's that decision-making saying, I've got to go now. And, again, when you see a guy have it, that kind of gets you pumped up. All right, let's flip over to defense for a couple minutes here, and let's just talk about it. I mean, they held Wofford under 200 yards, but it seemed very unspectacular. It wasn't like, massive amount of sacks. We had a significant amount of tackle for losses. But I think something we noticed is we saw a very heavy rotation of a lot of different players throughout the game, not just at the end when it was primary, just younger guys, all throughout the game. I mean, there were times where Keyshawn Artis played like 3 series in a row, and we didn't see Dax at all.
Yeah, there were long periods of the second line being in the game. Throughout the game. It wasn't just, as you said, sprinkled in the third or fourth quarter when the game was in hand. We saw a heavy rotation, and that's taking into account that we had 2 starting defensive linemen already out, so we were already a little bit into the depth chart by default there. But we saw DJ Harvey get a lot of run this week, even more so than last week. We saw a lot more Breon Murray on the field than we saw the last week, and we saw those safeties and Sam backers get rotated a lot more too. So there was a heavy dose. We saw Lawson got in there. We saw a lot more Keller this week. It was a really heavy rotation across the board, and you say 200 yards, under 200, but it was very unspectacular. There were first down here, first down there, then they punt, first down. There wasn't a ton of 3 and outs. There wasn't a ton of like abject domination.
Yeah.
We're, pushing them into like several, 3rd and 15 and longer situations.
Exactly.
It was very much a 2 yards, 3 yards, no yards, punt. First down, 3 yards, no yards, punt. Like there were a lot of those type of drives where they'd get a first down here, get a few yards, and then they punt it back to us. And I think some of that was by design, not necessarily just because we had some of the younger guys in or guys that are less experienced, but I think some of that had to do with how we were playing them and potentially how we were playing them in preparation for what we're about to see this week.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Let's look at the defensive back room real quick. We allowed 70% completions, including DJ Harvey let a big one go downfield. But when you looked at the tape, how are we playing? Because it felt to me we were playing off a ton. We weren't pressing any.
It was a lot more read react this week and a lot less blitzing.
Okay.
I mean, we talked about it last week. This is more of a West Coast type spread. Very similar to what they're going to be doing with the air raid with West Virginia, which we're going to preview here in a little bit. I think that they were kind of getting them set up for that more of a read react type um, secondary approach. There's not going to be a ton of getting in these guys' faces and pressing them at the line of scrimmage. Um, when we look at West Virginia, and I think some of that was by design, getting guys out there, getting them comfortable with those looks, because it is a little bit of a different approach that I think what we would like to do against a more typical, spread offense.
Got it. Now, but because of that, I think we saw it again, and every week we keep talking about it, Brian. Dude, the tackling form looked better this week than it had all year, and it's been significantly improved all year. But it seemed like wrapping and getting guys down quick, there were no chances for them to go any further than wherever they caught the ball.
Yeah, and that's going to be key with that read and react. You've got to be able to come up and make the tackle in the open field, and we did that consistently. We didn't give them a ton of extra yardage, after they made the catch. So that's going to be key going forward, and hopefully we can keep that type of play up heading into West Virginia this week.
Yep. Now let's talk about defensive line, because obviously we were down a couple, and when that happens, there are some guys who stepped up, and the two biggest are, without Tywan Garbett, C.J. McCray and Cole Nelson really took a big step up, and to a point where I think defensive line, again, much like the wide receiver room, is slowly, as we start playing more games, slowly starting to make itself deep, versus these are still the only two good guys to play. I mean, both guys had a sack. Both guys were getting after the quarterback, and it's great to see that.
Yeah, and I'm going to revise some of what I said at the start of the season. I was concerned about this defensive line to start the year, from a depth perspective, especially a D tackle with really only having three proven guys. We talked last week about Panay coming in and getting so many efficient snaps and kind of closing that distance between his play last year versus what he's doing this year. We've seen Cole Nelson now step up. C.J. McCray coming on the scene is going to be huge. He had some good plays against BC. We saw some more, a lot more this week with him getting kind of a steady rotation in that defensive line room. So if we can continue to make these strides on the defensive line, that's going to help us, because as we were talking about, when you can't bring the pressure like you want to against certain types of offensive attacks, getting pressure with four is going to be key. Mario Kendricks had a good game. He was living in the backfield. So if we can get more of these guys where we can get pressure with four more consistently, that's only going to be better down the road, and we won't have to necessarily worry about whether we're playing a certain type of offense or not.
Absolutely. And then with those guys taking those steps, now that Kendricks and Panay have kind of entrenched behind Fuga and Pollard, you've got four there, and with McCray and Kendricks along with Garbett and Jalen Griffin, he's not been spectacular, but he's been very steady at the other end position. It's like, okay, we've sort of got a little more depth where you feel comfortable rotating guys in and out to say, hey, this is your series, go out there and do it. And, it's kind of funny. There's something around the lunch pail. It's like J.C. Price, he's getting his yard dogs ready, and hopefully he can get them feast on Thursday night. All right, one scary play as a Hokie fan on Saturday, and it was late in the game. We were punting. We had punted deep. Their guy attempts to make a return, and Jamari Connor is on special teams as a gunner. And he absolutely lays the wood to that punt returner. And we're like, yeah, heck of a hit. We're all jacked up. It feels like the old days. And you come back and you see the ref with the headset on looking at the damn video, and you're like, oh, no, he shit. Did not call. Oh, mother.
Yeah, we were big time concerned, especially with who we got, coming into Blacksburg on Thursday. We don't want a guy like Connor out for a half because of some bullshit call like that. Thankfully, targeting was reviewed, no targeting. I was definitely on the edge of my seat that whole time. I was like, oh, come on, we can't lose this guy. But I mean, they were talking about it on the live broadcast. You know,
Eddie did.
The tweaks to the rules.
Yeah.
And you know, now it's literally top portion of the helmet.
It's this.
It's no
It's
longer
this.
just, you know, anything above the face mask.
No.
So I
It's
think that definitely played in our favor there. Thankfully.
so as much as the rule still needs to be fixed some, because as much as they've overstepped the boundary for targeting, they started bringing it back. And because if you saw the hit and you put it up there, Matt Jones, who was in the end zone, saw it. It was shoulder, and the reason it got to look like it was a targeting was because literally the way the guy moved once Shamari popped it, it literally didn't look like the head hit. So, you know, again, we held our breaths, we got through it, but that they still need to make it more. You can't punish a guy. I think you said a couple times, it's almost like the first one's just a penalty, 15 yards. The next one's an ejection. It's like it needs to be layered. You can't just continue. You're out a quarter for one. You made 12 perfect hits today. 12 perfect hits. Oh, this one's going to get you done for the next half of the next game, which is bullshit.
Well, my problem is that they don't take into account the aiming point of the defender.
True.
Because the aiming point was at the chest, and then you see the offensive player, the guy with the ball, is reacting to the hit coming, and now all of a sudden you got helmet-to-helmet contact. The aiming point needs to be taken into account. If you're launching and you're leading with your head high from the get-go, absolutely call that a targeting. We need that type of play out of the game. That's fine. But if an aiming point is at the breastplate of the guy with the ball,
they're down.
All of a sudden,
they're down.
You know, he's ducking down and getting in defensive position to take the hit, and now all of a sudden, you know, it's a helmet to helmet or something like that. Then, yeah, I mean that has to be taken into account. That's the modification that I'd like to see to that rule.
Absolutely. All right, so let's put a bow on it. Wofford week's over. 27-7 win. And let's flip over. Just take a look at some news and college football notes here. And the first one, Brian, for me and you and probably all the folks in the chat and watching live, a relief. The national championship will kick at 7:30 this year versus 8:30. Still a Monday night, which sucks, but at least we're getting to bed by 11. Been the stupidest thing. Let's kick it at 8:38. Like, are you kidding me? Like, why? Like,
our apologies to Grayson Wimbish out there on the West Coast.
Grayson can take a half day and head to. Well, this year actually he can go to it.
Yeah,
because it's a SoFi this year. So Grayson,
exactly.
Buy a ticket, whoever's in it, and go heckle the fan bases there. So I love the move. It's for us that are fans that watch legitimately from Labor Day weekend, Labor Day Thursday night until the national championship game, regardless who's playing. You just rewarded us instead of punishing us on Tuesday after the national championship.
It's a reward for 80% of the college football watching populace.
85. So, there's not that many out there.
I'm including the mountain time zone in this as well.
Well, wait a second. Mountain time zone.
It's 2 hours. It's 5:30. That's pushing it, man.
It's 5:30. Kick off work 30 minutes early. Go grab your dinner. That is the upside. You get to at least
happy hour. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Get your ass to the bar and watch the game.
All right. The official move. ACC is officially moving to Charlotte. Like should have happened 2 decades ago, probably not in 2022, but finally done. I mean, seriously, like Charlotte's one of the biggest growing hubs. So. You know,
I mean, Charlotte's been up and coming for a while. I mean, it is one of the premier East Coast cities now.
It is one of the biggest banking institutions and everything. So making the move there made perfect sense. That's where they do media day. I mean, we're going to do media day down here, but we're located up here. And it's just like, that makes 0 sense. So, you know, good for the conference. Hopefully it shows that they're trying to take some things seriously and keep the conference alive, maybe. Third piece of business. More than that.
Moving alone is not going to do it.
I'm just saying. All right, third piece of news here. This is pretty cool for us. especially since, me and you've known the family pretty much, since we were kids. Mackenzie Lauder, uh, Hokies catcher last year on the super regional team, has joined the VT softball team as a student coach. I know her dad and her mom and her whole family are super ecstatic for her to continue to stay up there and do something she loves, man.
Yeah, I mean that's big for that family. I mean that's a softball family. That's a
Yes,
coaching
they are.
family. It goes hand in hand, man. It goes hand in
It
hand.
does. It does. It does. Shout out Coach Alan Lauder, who had a deal with us in high school in his classes.
Yes, he did.
Hey, it was a good algebra teacher for me. I got like a B plus, and I was not good at math at that point in time in my life. All right, Brian, before we get into Know the Enemy West Virginia, let's take a quick pause for a message from our digital partners.
As we take a quick break, we'd like to tell you about getting your free website report from our digital partner, Grassroots Digital Marketing Studio. They'll tell you how your website ranks on Google, on-site SEO, and social media. No commitment to buy anything. You can get your free report by visiting grassrootsdigitalstudio.com/free-website-report. Now back to the episode.
All right, Brian. Well, let's get to it. Know the Enemy West Virginia. And let's just start right out the gate here, Brian. And let's start with the quarterback because he is the biggest name in this game. And that is JT Daniels, the 6'2", 226 quarterback from Mater D High School out in California. In 2018, he was a 5-star QB. He was the number 2 QB in the country. He transferred from USC, where he originally committed, to Georgia when he lost his job to Spencer last year. Transferred again to West Virginia now this year. A lot has been written and known about him, but just kind of doing a quick view on him from the first few games this year. I mean, is it still there?
I mean, he's still a solid quarterback. He gets the ball out really quick, especially on early throwing downs. Accurate in the short intermediate game. Probably could see improvements in his deep ball, but he can still make all the throws. But his biggest thing is his poise in the pocket. He doesn't really panic when things don't look good or when the pocket collapses around him. He does a good job of still getting the ball out. But sometimes that's to his detriment. He hangs on in the pocket there when the pressure's coming, and dangerously so. We had a couple balls when we were looking at the Pitt game where, guys are hitting his arm as he's throwing the ball. And, he had four times that his hand got hit as he was throwing the ball. None resulted in a turnover or an interception or anything like that. And 2 of them were completions. So, does the luck run out for him in this case? If we can get some pressure on him, we'll see. But he does do a good job of hanging in there and delivering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know he threw the pick 6 in the Pitt game, which was, I remember watching that game. He telegraphed that pass. And when the Pitt corner saw it, he jumped that route and housed it. Essentially, that was the game. But, so far this year, he's put up some pretty good statistical data, completed 64% of his passes. He's got over 750 yards already in 3 games, 6 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. Never been a real threat to run at all. And he's not really that athletic of a guy. But, overall, he is who he is. That 64%, he's at 63.8 for his entire career. He's got it close to 6,000, over 5,500, passing yards. So he is a good player on this team. Yep. And I'll tell you what, the guy he's throwing to primarily, his favorite target, Bryce Ford Whedon, that wide receiver, 6'3", 224, also 2018 class, North Carolina guy, played down at Holly Springs, down in Fuquay Arena. Probably a lot of folks listening here tonight, probably familiar with that area. Looked him up, no offer from Tech when he came out. And, so far this year, he has been kind of tearing it up, almost 300 yards through 3 games, 4 touchdowns, averaging just a little over 12 yards per catch. What's the tape tell you about this big-bodied guy?
Yeah, he's probably the best all around wideout we've seen so far this year. Ali Jennings and Zay Flowers did some really good stuff, but this is more of a prototypical NFL level type receiver. Great blend of size and speed, and he's a great route runner. He's got good hands. High point skills are off the charts. He's really good at high pointing the ball, but he will have a drop every now and again. So there's some opportunity there where key third down could potentially get drop one that gives us the ball back. And I have seen him occasionally disappear for stretches in the game. But when he's out, when he's feeling it, when he's in the zone, he's as good as anyone you can really watch on tape. He's that NFL type talent.
Nice. Anybody else in the wide receiver room catch your eye that we need to kind of keep an eye on this week?
Yeah, the guy opposite him, Caden Prather, is also someone I would watch. Both of these guys are big body NFL type receivers. You talked about Ford Whedon 6'3", 224. Prather's 6'4", 211. And both of these guys are quick. These are not just stick moving, big body receivers. They have the quickness to beat you deep. They have the quickness to move kind of underneath the coverage and get open and get some run after the catch as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned Prather, 6'4", 210. So again, you say big body, definitely big body. Not quite the statistics that Ford Whedon has, right at 200 yards, right at 11 per catch, but still you see those sort of numbers. And like you said, if he's opposite, he's probably definitely going to be getting the looks this week. Now we're going to look at the running back room next. And, as we were kind of deciding who to look at, Tony Mathis just had a big game against Towson last week, but the guy that's really caught our eye is CJ Donaldson, the halfback tight end, whatever you want to call him, 6'2", 240. He's from Miami, Florida. He is a true freshman. He was a 3-star in the 2022 class. And, so far this year, he's averaging almost 9.5 yards per touch. What's the tape telling on him, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that's listed as a tight end, but he primarily lines up in the backfield. He's a true running back. He reminds me of kind of a trimmer, quicker Brandon Jacobs.
Okay.
The way he runs the ball.
All right.
Kind of upright running style. Big guy can barrel you over. But he also he's quick enough at the second level where he can hit some big runs. He had a couple big runs against Pitt. I think one especially early on in that game that I think set up their first score there. And he had a couple red zone touchdowns against Kansas and then another one against Pitt. So he's really effective inside the red zone as well. So that's somebody that we need to keep an eye on because they don't run the ball very much. So, but when they do, it's usually pretty effective, and especially with C.J. Donaldson here.
Yeah, and you mentioned the touchdown. He's got 6 total for the year already, and we're in game 3. Did you notice anything like with pass pro? Is that another reason they are putting him back there? Is he a better pass protector for when it's those air raid shot times when they're going downfield?
He is showing the propensity to be a good blocker early, but he's still, I think, learning the offense a little bit. He's definitely more of kind of a package guy.
Okay.
They used him pretty heavily against Towson, but they used him more in packages against Pitt and Kansas.
Okay. Got it. And, it's kind of shows only 2 receptions for 10 yards this year as well. So not exactly, lighting the world on fire as a tight end, but definitely doing a lot of damage. Like I said, 9.5 yards a carry, just under 300 yards for the season. So definitely a guy we've got to keep an eye on. Now, Brian, let's go ahead and talk about the offensive line, where a known face to just about everyone in Hokie Nation, actually 2 very well-known guys, the former Hokie Doug Nestor, and a guy that everybody felt like was coming to Blacksburg as one of the top prospects on the offensive line, Wyatt Milam. What has the offensive line looked like with sort of the switch over to the air raid?
They've looked pretty good. They're still not an elite offensive line, but they look pretty good. I would, let's talk about Milam first. He's probably their best overall lineman at this point. He's playing left tackle for them. He's good in the run game and the pass game. But he's also a guy kind of similar to Brock Hoffman. He's gonna get some penalties. He had a couple procedure penalties against Pitt. Had a personal foul call against Pitt. Had a couple other penalties since then, so he gets penalized pretty heavily, more so than you would think for an offensive lineman of his caliber of play. So that's something we might be able to take advantage of as the game goes along. They've moved Nestor out to right tackle now. He's probably their best overall run blocker, but he's still like he was when he was a Hokie, kind of mid in pass pro.
Okay.
But when they like to run, they like to run his direction. He does a good job in the run game. And then you got name you haven't mentioned, Zach Frazier, the center, number 54. He's kind of the opposite of Nestor. He's really good in the pass pro, but he kind of gets pushed back a little bit in the run game.
All right. Have you seen that? I mean, I know it was a few plays during the Pitt game that clearly the line broke down. I mean, are they like a roller coaster ride where sometimes they're doing great and then all of a sudden 3, 4, 5, 6 plays in a row, they just look like dog crap?
Yeah, I mean, they never were able to really assert themselves against Pitt in the running game. They had, again, a couple big runs, and then they finished pretty well in the red zone, but they didn't do a whole lot kind of between the 20s, short of those couple big runs by Donaldson. So if we can keep them behind the sticks, that's probably going to be the most effective way to negate what they can do there in the run game.
All right. Well, let's kind of talk about this offense. We've mentioned it 4 or 5 times. This is clearly an air raid offense, something that, Hal Money back at Valdosta State in the 90s came up with. And then Mike Leach brought to the forefront at Texas Tech in the early 2000s. And one of his very first quarterbacks is their offensive coordinator, which is Graham Harrell. Kind of give us a breakdown of some of the stuff we normally see in air raid, if they do anything a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly prototypical air raid, but they do have a little bit more of a run emphasis than your traditional air raid. They like to employ tempo, especially when they connect on a good run or pass on some of those early downs. They'll get going, get back to the line of scrimmage. They're hurrying up. They're trying to get the next play out. They're trying to keep you on your toes, keep you from being able to sub, and then working those mismatches. Contrary to last year, though, they're not a great running team, but they can be effective when they hit a home run. We saw Donaldson hit a couple long runs against Pitt. We've seen Mathis get 1 or 2 here or there, especially last week against Towson. So they can still hit that, but there's no Letty Brown out there this year. So okay. Don't expect to get completely gashed like we did last year when we played West Virginia in Morgantown. The rush is kind of used as a drive starter, not really used as a drive starter. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, but it's more used as a change of pace from kind of that quick hitting pass game that's prevalent in the air raid.
Got it. How much do they push it downfield? Because you have so many air raids where the push downfield is almost like an old school NFL philosophy where we're only going to take about 2 or 3 shots in a half. And then you've got to, and when I say that, it's because they're playing perimeter ball, right? You're looking at tunnels and bubbles and quick outs, getting the ball out quick. Do they have a propensity to go deep a lot, or is it more of they're trying to pop you for a quarter and a half, and then all of a sudden once you come up, then over the top they go?
Yeah, they kind of suck you in with that, and then they'll work some double moves off of that. And the receivers, they're both, again, we talked about it, they're both big out there, but they've got wiggle, they've got speed. So that helps them both in the short game and when they decide to go deep. So they have the ability to do both. Right. But they usually stay in that short to intermediate zone most of the time, but they will take a shot here and there.
All right, got it. So sort of a balanced, not your typical original air raid where it was just a ton of perimeters then downfield, where, again, we've seen it develop where There are some teams in air raid concepts that are just attacking downfield a ton. So very good to know that.
Yeah, they're not just trying to stretch you vertically and horizontally. They will stretch you vertically as well. So, um, yeah, that's one thing to keep an eye on. But they're not just taking shots downfield all game either.
Absolutely. Now, Brian, let's flip over to the defense here in just a second. But there's a comment I want you to throw up out there from our coach Robbie Compton, talking about that. If you give the space, if you press, they vert. Goes back to what we saw right against Wofford. Why are we playing off? There it is right there. All right, but now let's flip over to the defense and let's talk about the guy who probably should be playing in the NFL right now. I'm still trying to figure out why he came back for one more season at West Virginia, and that would be Dante Stills, the 6'4", 285. Call him a strong side defensive end. Call him a 3 technique. He is a damn good player. He was a 4-star when he came out in 2018. He was the top player in West Virginia that year. He was a top 10 defensive lineman. He was a top 150 overall player. He was a stud when he came out, and he's lived up to it every single, basically his entire time at West Virginia.
Yeah, he's an absolute monster on that 3-man front, playing that defensive tackle. Has a relentless motor, really quick off, converts speed to strength really effectively. They use him a lot in stunts. They'll bring him all the way across the line of scrimmage. And he's got a spin move that, for a guy his size, is as elite as you can imagine. His other moves are not as effective at the snap, but that motor is what really sets him apart. He keeps working. So he's a guy that if you're not staying on your block, holding your leverage, he's going to eventually get to the quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, he caused havoc for them last year, and this year so far, I mean, he's already at 8 tackles, 3 for loss, a couple of sacks. His career numbers, 120 tackles. And again, this is as a playing an end on a 3-man front, 120 tackles, 47 tackles for loss, and over 20 sacks. That's elite. Again, I think when he was projected like a 2nd-round pick last year, and he came back, which is just insane. Because usually you get a grade that high, you go, especially defensive lineman, you will be taken. All right, let's talk about somebody who has to clean up what he does, and that would be Lee. And I'm going to go Pogba, Kpogba. He is a six. I try. He is a 6'1", 230-pound linebacker. Winston-Salem, North Carolina, at Parkland High School. Came out in 2019 as a 3-star. He originally committed to Syracuse, where he was for a couple years. Then he went the JUCO route in 2021, and then transferred as a JUCO to West Virginia. And so far this season, 18 total tackles and 1 fumble recovery. So some solid numbers up front. What are you seeing on tape?
Yeah, he's a great athlete and has good speed for the Mike position. He's another kid with a great motor, never gives up on a play. They'll send him on blitzes. He's a guy that can kind of disrupt the backfield in the run game and in the pass game. But he does struggle to sometimes shed blocks in the run game. So he does struggle from time to time. So we can get up to the next level on him. We can neutralize him a little bit.
All right, so there's some of those plays like you've been mentioning before, like you seem to be stagnant instead of going up to the next level. Let's hope we can get in his face. All right, next guy we want to talk about here is Marcus Floyd. Marcus Floyd is a defensive back. He is 6 foot, 194 pounds. Louisville, Kentucky is where he is from. Completely unrated out of high school on any service when he came out in 2018. He started by going to an in-state Murray State, so an FCS program, all Hokies should be very familiar with, and then decided to transfer to West Virginia in December of 2021. Where's he lining up, Brian? What's he doing for the Mountaineers?
Yeah, so he's a former corner. Most of the the snaps he was playing at his former stop, he was playing corner, but now he's playing what's called the cat safety in this 3-3 stack defense, similar to a rover type of position. He's above average in coverage, especially when he can read and react versus being in man. And he's a good tackler. Use him occasionally as a blitzer. He does. It's kind of similar to Lee Pogba. He can disappear when you put a body on him. So if he gets blocked, he doesn't do a good job of shedding and getting and making the play. He's at his best when he can just fly up into the spill area and make a play in the run game. And like I said, he's above average in that zone coverage, that read and react coverage.
Did you see any sort of plays where he was left on a man? Like if they went to some sort of cover 0 or cover 1 where he was forced to cover a slot?
He did okay, but he doesn't have elite level speed to keep up with guys. And his technique is not that great. I mean, it's just average.
So it's one of those things where we potentially look for a matchup like a Dwayne Lofton or Jaden Blue in that slot if we get the right looks, and maybe not going over the top, but trying some of that quick twitch type stuff where you feel like his skill set is not that.
I saw a few times when he got matched up in man where crossers were kind of plays that we could take advantage of him.
Okay. All right. Make a note of that right there. All right. How about we take a look at one more defensive player, and then before we get into the defensive breakdown, and that is the defensive lineman Taj Alston. 6'4", 255 pounds. Another North Carolina kid from Lumberton, North Carolina, down there near Fayetteville. He attended Copia Lincoln Community College out in Nebraska, and then he committed to West Virginia as a 3-star in 2019. So far this season, as an end, he's got a tackle for loss, a couple forced fumbles, which is very interesting to see. What's the tape showing on him, and how does he do opposite of Stills?
He does pretty good opposite of Stills, especially when the quarterback's dropping back. He is more of a pure pass rusher. He's more of the true defensive end in this type of 3-man front, whereas Stills is more of the balanced player. But he has really good speed off the edge. But he does struggle to make plays in the run game when you run directly at him. When you put a big body on him, he can be blocked. So I imagine we run away from Stills a little bit, run at Taj Alston, and try to neutralize his pass rush as much as we can by chipping.
Yep. And we definitely need to do that because last year against the Hokies had 4 total tackles, including a sack and a half in the game last year down in Morgantown. So obviously he's familiar with the Hokies. Obviously he's familiar with some of these offensive linemen we're going to be playing. Now, Brian, let's flip over. Let's talk about the defense itself. You've mentioned a couple times already they have not changed it yet. They're still in a 3-3 stack. And what you've seen, especially against Pitt and Kansas this year, and why those teams were able to come out and get on top of the West Virginia Mountaineers.
Yeah, so they're very average against the rush attack. And that's the big thing. Pitt was able to establish the line of scrimmage pretty early in that game, and it kept going throughout the game where they were able to run pretty consistently against that front, especially with Hammond. Hammond had a lot of success against that front. They're an attacking defense, as most 3-3s are. They do a good job of blitzing, designing, confusing offensive lines with how they bring pressure and where they're bringing it from. And they rely on that pressure as they are at best a work in progress on the back end. When you look at that secondary, you got 5 key guys there, and only one of them was recruited by West Virginia out of high school. Everyone else is a transfer, and most of them are transferring from FCS and G5 programs. So it's really an interesting defense to face because there's a lot of new faces on the back end, pretty much all new faces on the back end compared to what we saw last year.
Okay.
And then up front, it's kind of the same old song and dance with Stills, coming through there in Alston. So if we can hold up in the offensive line category, which is probably where we're struggling with the most overall on that offense right now.
Yeah.
If we can hold up, there's some opportunities there. But occasionally you'll see them adjust to a 4-man line. They did that in the second half against Pitt when Pitt was big time gashing them in the running game. The bandit position played by Jarrett Bartlett, he ends up lining it up opposite Alston with Stills moving down into a more 4-3 3 technique.
Are you glad that we got that on tape though? Are you glad that they sort of had to show that hand early against West Virginia about if they couldn't when the 3-man front is getting gashed, they've got to show the 4-man and where Bartlett's got to come down. Are you glad that's on tape for our coaching staff?
Yeah, and we saw it some last year, so it's not something that we haven't seen before, but
Okay.
it's good to see what it looks like in this current version of the defense with some of those new faces on the back end.
Gotcha. All right. So there is kind of a overview of both the Mountaineers offense and defense and some of the key players that we'll be looking at to not have good games on Thursday night. Now let's go to the Hokie keys for this game. And Brian, as I was looking at the data and diving and looking at one thing then the other, something that caught my eye is third down conversions and on both sides of the ball. Because West Virginia is one of the better in the country. They are completing 54% of their third downs, which is an unbelievable number. I'd love to get 44%. But as I was digging, and as probably all of us heard Saturday, Virginia Tech doesn't give up third downs. And it's not one of those, we're in the top 20, the top 15. We're number 3 in the country. And the Hokies are allowing only 17% of third down conversions defensively. So in one of those games where it's the high-powered offense against the, high-powered defense, it's got to break one way or the other. And is there anything you foresee that might assist the Hokies in keeping that, 17% as the norm for Thursday night?
I mean, I think one thing that's helping us is that we got to, practice a little bit of what we're going to get against West Virginia against Wofford. I think we've kind of seen what we can do with that style of offense. And now we've had a correction period, right?
Yeah.
They went out there, they corrected some of those mistakes. We got some young guys to get some reps against that style of defense. So that I think that's key. But the other key is going to be keeping everything in front of you and tackling. Because if we don't tackle, then that third down percentage is going to go up this week.
Yeah.
We've got to be in the right position, and then when we come up, we've got to make the tackle and make sure that they're not getting more than a yard or two after the catch in this offense.
Yep, it's that big piece. Another key of ours. It's the tackling in space. And so much with the air raid concept is where they catch the ball is where they've got to fall. If you can do that consistently, it will frustrate an air raid offense consistently because instead of getting the 5 or 8, they're getting the 2 to 4, and it's putting them in unfavorable down and distances as you get deeper into the plays.
And then that means we can get into a little bit more of what we like to do with dialing up pressure on those third and long situations.
Pin the ears back and go. All right. So I said it was both sides of the balls. And, as bad as we are at converting, we are 90th right now in the country, and that's at 36%. So basically 1 out of every 3 third downs we convert. They are one of the worst defensively. They're 112th out of 131 teams. And they roughly only stop teams 46% of the time. I am hoping that our number can come up to their mean, because if you're telling me we convert close to 50% of the time on Thursday night, I will feel really good about our chances at winning this game, because the less time that offense is on the field, it's the best thing for us.
Yeah, the big key is going to be getting them off the field on third down and us staying on the field on third down. Lengthening this game shortening this game is going to be key for the Hokies. I think possessing the ball and shortening the game is going to be key for the Hokies in terms of pulling out a W, because if they're going fast and they're running a bunch of plays and they're going up and down the field, they're going to get some points off those, and eventually those points are going to not work in our favor, because I don't see us as a quick straight offense. We're not going to be able to go out there and stack points and match them score for score if it becomes that type of game.
Absolutely, Brian. And that's kind of where it's the next kind of thing that we've been talking about our key is the Hokies run game against the West Virginia run defense. The West Virginia is, and thanks for putting that up. Thanks, Low Country Living, for that. I had heard that. I do think King's going regardless. I think it's one of these. If he's at 85% on Thursday, he's going, because him at 85% is probably still better than any running back we've got. And for this running game, can we open it up? They're giving up roughly about 120 a game. It's roughly about middle of the pack. It's not elite. It's not great, but it's not god awful. But the whole thing is what kind of Brian's been mentioning about getting it going. If we're converting third downs, it's a whole new back end. And slowly but surely, if we're gashing, what has to happen with that back end, Brian, if we're gashing them for 4 to 7 yards every play?
That means they're going to have to play up in the box a little bit more to help stop the run, help support the run, and eventually that's going to hopefully open up some stuff on the back end. We just have to be in a position to take advantage of that.
You got to take advantage of it. But you've already mentioned it is a flawed back end. And it kind of shows they do give up a lot more passing yards than rushing yards. So, again, getting the run game going and getting them to have to get into situations where they're uncomfortable on the back end is so key.
Yeah, their success on the back end is predicated on getting pressure on the quarterback. They are not a great back end team.
So I think that's one of those things where we talked about Gallo. If we start getting Gallo going and him or Drake going in the flats early and we're picking up significant, that immediately is going to make the safeties, both probably the bandit and probably the rover guy, to come up. And if that's coming up more and more, if they're trying to come up to safety, make the cat safety, God, just call it a rover for God's sakes. But if they're coming up more and more, then, guess what? There's going to be lanes to throw down to those crossers we've been talking about. Some of our better plays this year. All right, last piece, and this is just mind-blowing to me. So West Virginia has given up 100 points this year in 3 games. So that means they're giving up over 30 points a game. The insane part is, Brian, they've given up 63 in red zone trips. They've been in the red zone 10 times. They've been scored on 9 times, all via touchdown. I don't think that's good.
9 times.
9 of 10. I don't think that's great. I mean,
any of my Ferris Bueller fans know the reference.
9 times. But seriously, right now we've been down there 8. We are converting 75% of the time, which you want more than that. But to say that, what was the thing we just talked about in the Wofford game? We didn't finish drives. This is a team that just allows teams to finish drives, it seems, at will if you get inside the 20-yard line.
Yeah, it's one of those, when we looked at earlier with the third down, it's kind of unstoppable force against a movable object. Now you've got the reverse of that.
Exactly.
You got a team that's somewhat struggling to finish drives against a team that does nothing but let teams finish drives. So
you've got a team that decides to trip up and fall down, and the team that does Olay and gets out of the way. You can go score that touchdown. So there are kind of the keys to what we're seeing with some of the data, some of the players. And Brian, we have come, every week we've got to do this, and we made predictions at the beginning of the season, and now it's time for this game prediction. And since you led last week, I do get the honor this week, sir. And this one was tough. Me and Brian, we sat about 30 minutes this afternoon, had a phone call, just chatting a little bit of everything about what we're going to go over tonight. And all the data points say it's going to be a good game because of the contrarians of what's going on each side of the team. It's going to be a good game, but it seems like everything leans West Virginia. They've got a okay defense versus and they've got a really great offense, where we've got a great defense statistical wise, and our offense, it's not as bad as last year, y'all. Last year we were 103. Right now we're ranked 93rd. So we've actually improved offensively this year, whether we know it or not. But I kept going back to thinking it's Thursday night. It's Lane. It's a sellout. Justin Mutz is going to be in Hokie colored coveralls to get the chant going. And I think it's going to be one or two big plays that completely swing this game. And for all those out there, if you can take off Friday, if you're going to the game, you better take off Friday because you're not going to be in any condition to work. If you are working on Friday, my condition is you need to call somebody tomorrow and say you're not working, because I think this is going to be a thriller to the end. In my prediction, I'm going to stick with what I had at the beginning of the season. I think the Hokies pull this one out. I think it's a war, and I think the Hokies take it by a point, 31-30.
I like your optimism. And we actually have West Virginia scoring the exact same amount of points. The problem is I've got the Hokies only scoring 24 of them. I've got this as a solid game front to back. We're in it the whole way. We're slowing them down just enough. We give up 3 touchdowns. We give up 3 field goals. We still keep a good defensive performance overall, but we don't quite do enough, and the offense doesn't quite do enough to get that W.
Brian's basically saying the offense is not going to finish a few times.
Yeah, I'm not fully trusting this offensive line yet. And I think the communication and the way that West Virginia likes to bring the blitz and the pressure from a lot of different areas, if that communication has not taken a step since Wofford, then that's going to be problematic. And when you're trying to close the game out and you're trying to come back, down 1 score, trying to finish out, you're going to be throwing the ball. There's going to be that pressure. And I'm just questioning whether we can hold up.
All right, so there you go. I got 31-30 VT. Brian's trying to be the realist of our group, saying 30-24 West. Hey, I mean, we pick against each other sometimes. It's what happens. All right, Brian. So let's flip it. Let's look at our big screeners this week. What's going to be on your big screen at some point in time during the day Saturday?
I've got Florida at Tennessee. That's going to be my big screener. Tennessee.
Hendon.
Man, if we look at the guys that are showing out, I mean, obviously, we got one starter we're playing against this week that used to be on the Hokies. We've got another down in Louisville starting on that offensive line. We got Hendon tearing it up in Tennessee. He's a Heisman front runner at this point.
Tay's playing good over Kentucky.
Yeah. It's a tough look, man. It's a tough look. But when I look at that one, Tennessee is actually a 10-point favorite here, and that's a little too rich for my blood.
Okay.
So I'm going to take Florida in the 10. But I think Tennessee wins the game outright. But
okay.
I've got Florida in the 10 points here.
That is a lot to play, especially, I mean, Tennessee's had very little success with Florida over the last half decade, heck, over the last full decade. So that is a lot to lay in. Again, they got up for Utah, and I think that's a fine bet. Now, for me, I'm going to stay in the ACC. It is probably the game that is either going to end DJ Uiagalelei's career or springboard him to actually doing big things. That's Clemson Wake Forest. It is going to be a high noon kick. So I'm going to miss probably about half of this game because of baseball. I'll come in, check the second half, probably be following on the phone while I'm there. I do think Clemson wins. I think Clemson's a 7.5-point favorite. I think Clemson wins outright. I'm not touching that spread. That offense is too anemic and the defense is too good. I am going to say the under of 55.5. I think it's going to be something like a 24-21 game, maybe 28-24. Clemson pulls it out, not enough to cover. But I think that's going to be an entertaining game. There's actually a lot of entertaining games. I chose this one, and it was one more. I think Saturday night in Corvallis, Oregon State, USC. You said it to me when we talked earlier. This is a game we're going to know if Lincoln Riley is for real at USC in year one, because that's a tough-ass place to play, and Oregon State has been playing very good recently.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's his first big test. I think we'll see if this is a team that's ready to actually be competitive and challenge for a potential college football playoff spot, or if they're just a team that has some talent but is still a year or two away from making that step. When you look at that team, though, they've got the players.
Yep.
And the question is, has Lincoln Riley instilled that winning culture enough in such a short period of time where things start to click when it gets tough a little bit? And so I think that there's going to be times where that game it might be tough for a little bit. We'll see how they react.
Yep, because Oregon State scored over 30 every game this year. They did have a war with Fresno State in which, everybody's going to say, well, if we look at the common opponent, Fresno State, USC won by 21. I listened to a podcast. It's a San Francisco Niners podcast, and one of the guys went to Fresno, so he pays super attention to them. And their best player went down early first half. So we didn't really get a reflection of Fresno State versus USC. So I'll probably be up till 1 o'clock in the morning Saturday. I'm just going to go ahead and book it. It's a 9:30 kick. Have a couple late cocktails and some whatever's left over in the fridge.
Yeah, we got to remember to tell everybody, though, that the transitive property does not exist in college football. So you can look at common opponent all you want to, but that doesn't mean shit.
It don't mean shit. It don't mean shit, and it's wild. And I think the last few weekends with some of these games and some of the finishes have just been perfect. It's why we love Sundays too. Don't get us wrong. We love Sundays. We have our teams. Brian is currently wanting to go. Well, probably kill someone he wanted to kill 15 years ago. But I mean, we're not going to put it into there. Matt Ron. But
accurate.
But Saturdays is where we live. It's I think when you grow up in the South, it's just a little different on Saturdays. And Brian, you went to a successful D3 school where even though with 1,200 people on campus, Saturdays were wild on Hampton-Sydney's campus during a football game. So it hits a little different for us. All right. Be quiet, Robbie. That was one time after one too many drinks. Brian, anything? Yeah, you see what he put in there?
No comment.
I've never let that. No. Anything breaking over the last little while? We've been on right at 90 minutes, brother.
I think we're good, bud.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Boundary Corner podcast. I'm Curtis Wilson.
I'm Brian Siegler.
Visit our website at boundarycornervt.com to listen to all of our episodes. While you are there, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Subscribe on our YouTube account. Thank you, all you guys out there listening on YouTube tonight. We really appreciate your interactions here. Also, podcast sources, Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts. We are still there. Subscribe to your favorite. Let it be there for you in the morning to listen again. As always, we let our buddy Jason Long play us in, play us out. On October 2nd, he is going to be at the Food Hub's pop-up brunch market at Golden Cactus Brewery on 214 5th Street Southwest in Roanoke. So check him out there. Go have some beer, have some food. We thank you always for listening. Jesus Christ. We thank you for listening as always. Hate you, West Virginia. Let's go.
Hokies.